announce, let's see, I'm going to announce a couple of times during the webcast the immersion. So in April 19 and 20, there's going to be a Real Love immersion in Atlanta. In another 5 days, there's going to be a download of the PBS special on the satellite, and then gradually this will be played increasingly across the country. So I recommend to people that they sign up for the Real Love immersion, because increasingly new people, as they come onto the website for PBS, are going to be signing up for that. And eventually you will not find room to sign up. So I recommend you do that. So go to the website, and at the bottom of the website, the main website, reallove.com, you'll find 4 major squares, I guess. And one of those is for signing up for the immersion in Atlanta. Somebody's asking about their, my 2.5-year-old is obviously not feeling love. She bites. Sometimes I can avoid and redirect her, but other times I get angry. Not sure what to do about that. The long-term solution, obviously, is getting more love for you. So you can't skip the long-term solution. You've got to do whatever it takes to get more love for yourself, because when a child doesn't feel love, the child bites. And so it always comes down to us. In the short term, the instant a child bites, and I mean the second a child bites, you can't let it go ever, but the second a child bites, you have to immediately reach down and grab the child's face. The second they do it, and you grab the child's face, when you're talking about little kids who you can't reason with, I know I've said this before, and some people don't like it. Well, tough. It's much like training a dog. You reach down and you grab the child's face and you say, "We don't bite." And you speak in a firm but not angry voice. And I hope you're paying attention to me here, because when I say firm but not angry, if you don't feel loved, there's no way you can fake this. I'm not kidding. Because if you're angry, it'll come across as angry. And what I just did for you there was an example of that. I'm not joking. You grab the child's face and you go, "We don't bite." And the kid absolutely gets that. They're taken aback. They get, "Okay, we don't bite." And they don't like that consequence. They don't like hearing, "Okay, we don't bite." And then you immediately hug the child and say, "But I sure love you. And do you understand what I just said?" And you repeat it again. So you love and teach. It's one word, love and teach. You can't separate them. You do it at the same time. And you do it however many times it takes. And if the child does that kind of thing repeatedly, you say, "Well, I guess we'll have to put you in a place where you can bite all you want." And if you have to make a joke of it, fine. You put the child in a room and you say, "So you can go in here." The child's 2.5. Bite the doors. Bite the floor. Bite the closet. But we don't bite people. And at 2.5, she or he does understand that. We don't bite people. And there's a huge difference between speaking firmly and speaking angrily. What's the difference? How you feel. You can't fake this stuff. It's all about how you feel. Love and teach. One word. I can't remember if I went over this last time. Last time, did I go over the call I was on with Angela? I don't think so. I was on a call with Angela, And I don't normally skulk around on calls and listen in on other people's conference calls. In fact, I just don't do that normally. But I was listening on Angela's conference call, and there was a lady who was talking about how the best way to raise children is to do it with rewards. Kid does the right thing, then you give them whatever. Points, cookies, sparkles, stars, you know, whatever. And I can't remember what rewards she gave hers, but and you know, she was telling everybody on the call how that was definitely the right way to go. And I couldn't resist anymore, and finally said that, you know, it's not right. It bribes children. What it does is it trains them like you would train a circus animal. You can get them to be obedient for short periods of time, but you don't train them to be, you don't teach them to be happy. They don't learn, all you do is get them to do what you want. Now, just a second ago, I talked about when a child is biting, you sometimes use animal training techniques to get them to stop doing the wrong thing for a second, for a moment. But you don't train children using animal training techniques to do the right thing. There's a big difference. And that's what she was talking about. Train them using rewards. It's a huge difference. And if you teach children using rewards, you actually train the fun out of things. Anyway, so I was talking about not using rewards and not using punishments and so on, instead of doing all that to love and teach. And there were a couple of people on the call who were becoming pretty irritated, actually, because that's how they raise their children. People usually only become irritated when you're assaulting what they do. And when I got off the call, apparently, I guess nobody on the call knew who I was, which is fine with me. Somebody asked Angela who I was, and so Angela told him, and one of the ladies said, "Oh my," she said, well then, she'd assumed that I was just some crank caller, and so she said, well, maybe I need to think about that. So she called me up the next day, and she said, you know, I've been thinking about this, and she said, it occurs to me that just the other day, my daughter said to me, I'm always on restriction. I'm always grounded. She said, are you trying to ground me? And she said it finally hit her after what her daughter said and after the phone call with me. She said, you know, you're right, she said. She said, I'm always grounding my daughter. I'm always giving her rewards. I'm always restricting her because it's easier, because I'm a lazy and irresponsible parent. She said, the most difficult thing to do is to learn to be a loving parent. And I don't really want to. It's too hard. So I really had to admire her. That takes real guts. Parsing out, or parceling out rewards and punishments is, frankly, just a lazier way to parent. I want to read you an example or a story that, and I'm going to just briefly tell you that I'm going to try to read some of the things that you put up here live, but I'm going to tell you that so many people send emails ahead of time now that I'm going to give more attention to the stuff that people send ahead. So if you want to get a question answered, the best way to do it is to email it to me. Greg@reallove.com. I got more time to give to those. So here's a lady who said, this morning my husband Ryan was pretty rude to me. She said, I knew it would be better to talk to him after it calmed down, especially after he had calmed down. I can't stand it when we get into a fight and he can just go to work and forget about it, and I sit home and think about it all day. So I confronted him. So notice, she has to be right. She has to get in there and get her licks in. It went okay, except that I was feeling really empty, so I wasn't able to really listen to what he was saying or to love him. I say it went okay because I think he finally saw where I was coming from. See? So okay to her means when she gets listened to. I don't think that he thinks it went well because I doubt that he feels like I really listened to him. Well, I did listen, but I argued with most of what he said. So did she really listen? No. I'm really frustrated with myself right now. I was raised by two sets of parents, and both sets included very dominant wives. Gee, I wonder where she learned this. I don't want a relationship like my parents have, but I've kind of got it. Gee, what a surprise. Unless we're taught differently, we end up with what we learned. We don't end up with what we want. We end up with what we learn. I've got a combination of my four parents and Ryan's too, who are in the middle of a divorce. Big surprise there. So anyways, I'm not loving. I think I'm right. I am right. I'm always right. I know it all. He's angry that I'm always telling him how wrong he is. I'm not always telling him how wrong he is. I only tell him how wrong he is when he is wrong, and he's always wrong. So I wrote to her, and I asked what she had learned from this experience. She said, what did I learn? Well, I'm needy. And then I asked her what she would do differently. And essentially the short version is, she said, not very much, because she hasn't learned very much. So she pretty much says she wants to keep her marriage from going on in the same direction, but she would probably end up doing the same thing. And that's the point of real love, is to teach people to do something differently the next time. So I asked her for some details. She said, I was using the computer and it was running really slow. It's slowed down a lot lately. It might have something to do with the photos and software on it. The details of that aren't that important. So she made the comment that she'd like to get a computer just for photos and so on. And he said, yeah, sure, if you're happy. And she asked him several times and he said yes. Then a few minutes, and then so she started looking for a computer. Looking for ads. And then later on, she asked again if he was serious, and he said yes. And a few minutes later, he said that he couldn't believe that I was actually considering buying a laptop in our current financial situation. He went on and on about it and caught me totally off guard. In my head, I thought that he thought it was a good idea, since that was what he said. He spends a lot of time on the computer for school and gets frustrated when the computer is slow. When there are problems with the computer, it's up to me to figure them out because he doesn't like to. So he was totally appalled that spending more money was my solution for the problem, and didn't I know he was being sarcastic? I asked him multiple times, how am I supposed to tell when he's being sarcastic and when he's being serious? When I specifically asked him if he's being serious, he says yes. He was talking really loud and was really mad, and I told him I didn't want to talk about it anymore. And he said, mocking me, no, we need to resolve this, since he knows that I usually don't like to just let things go. And then I was really pissed off because I feel like putting a lot of energy into our relationship, and I make a big deal about, so you know where all this went. And so they got into a really big argument, and things eventually calmed down. Nobody is listening to anybody. Everybody has to be right. This could have stopped really early on. Do you see how the content doesn't matter at all? As soon as you see that your partner is upset, see, you're arguing about the content. How am I supposed to know when you're being sarcastic, blah, 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 and how, blah, 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 and you use your computer when, and everybody's arguing about the details. It has nothing to do with the details. As soon as you see that your partner is upset, you weren't listening, and your partner doesn't feel loved. So the instant your partner is upset, you go sit down by your partner and you say, obviously I wasn't listening, so tell it to me again and I'll listen better this time. And the argument will be over. Because the instant you say, but you said, as soon as you say, but you said, all your partner hears is, I am right, and I don't give a flying hoot about you. That's all your partner hears. Because all that matters in a conversation is love, not a computer. So you go over to your partner and you say, obviously, I misunderstood this. It doesn't matter whether your partner was a complete horse's behind in expressing himself sarcastically. It's pretty obvious he was wrong. I got it. Clearly he was being sarcastic. But you missed the sarcastic signs too. Now, should you have been able to pick up on the sarcasm? Oh, who knows? Actually, nobody should be expected to pick up on sarcasm. You know? Because people, if they want to say something clearly, should just say it clearly. So if he wanted to say no, he should have just said no. So he was wrong to be sarcastic. But does that matter? No. Because as soon as you saw him upset, at that point, you understood his real message. So now the conversation is completely different. Now you know what he really meant, and there's no sense arguing about it. Now you're going to do whatever it takes to be loving. Done. Now persisting in the old conversation is stupid. Stupid and unloving. Makes no sense to keep going. Now you know how to do it differently, don't you? Now you can begin to do it differently. This doesn't mean that you will do it differently next time. It doesn't. In fact, the very next time, you might do it the same. But you'll have at least an inkling of how to begin to do it differently. And that's huge. Just an inkling. That's very cool. That's plenty. You don't have to get it right every time. Only Donna gets it right every time. Here's somebody who says, I really... okay, here's the person who sent me that note, who happens to be on, and says, oh, this is so good, because this is great. This is a very common thing. I should have brought this up on my own, but I didn't think of it. She says, my fear is that if I love him the way he is, this is great, when he's sarcastic, rude, and all that he'll stay that way. And you're seeing it exactly backward. The entire reason that people are sarcastic, rude, attacking, and so on is what? Because they don't feel loved. Pay attention to me. Look really closely at my lips. We've got it completely backward. What you're afraid of is that he's going to get away with it. Really. You can't stand the fact that you're not the woman with the blindfold holding the scales of justice. And that you can't grab him by the hair and pull him up in front of the bar of justice and beat him to death for his sins. That's what's bugging you. Because the truth is that, and she just said, yes, that's the truth, sweetie. We hate to admit this stuff, but that's what bothers you. Because when people feel unconditionally loved, they quit being sarcastic. Think about it. If you know for a fact that I love you from head to toe, I accept and care about you no matter what you do, would you ever be rude or sarcastic to me? Never. It wouldn't even enter your mind to do that. No way. So, if you can learn to get enough love from other people to pass that on to Ryan, he'll stop it. So that your real concern isn't that. Your real thing is, and this is something that you've learned from your parents, is that when somebody screws up and they hurt you, you simply want to hurt them back. Because when they hurt you, the scales of justice are out of balance. It's not fair. And you want to hurt them until the pain balance is fair. And, you know, it doesn't work like that. When we hurt somebody else, all we get is misery for ourselves. I've tried it. You don't end up feeling better at the end of that little excursion. Give it a shot, sweetie. But you really can't fake this. You really got to get enough love from other people like you're getting right here. Notice that as I'm telling you, you were a witch in the way you treated him. What you did with him was unkind, it was mean, it was unloving, it was dumb, and I get it. We've all done it. It's understandable, but unproductive? Man, it just doesn't work. You are trained to do it, but it'll kill you. I mean, kill you dead. It's just so destructive. So come here to get loved. Go to the many conference calls that are available to you, free. Get loved there. Learn to do it differently. Somebody sent in a question that says, being annoyed. I get annoyed when somebody, like, for example, when somebody never changes the roll of toilet paper, or like when they leave like 2 squares left and they don't change it. So what do you do about it? Well, it kind of depends on who it is. If it's a child in your house, like a teenage child who repeatedly does it, then you teach them. You say to the child, they're leaving the bathroom, and you know that the roll was, a quarter full when they went in there, and it's empty when they leave, and it's not replaced, and you stop them and go, you, the irresponsible one, what's with the roll? Oh, well, it wasn't me. This is actually pretty easy to figure out. You go, yeah, I think it probably was. So here's the deal. I've talked to you about this subject how many times now? So when we've talked about this in other webcasts, if you can't manage to take care of your end of being responsible with the bathroom, then you're going to have to use a porta potty outside. Simple. What you don't use responsibly, you lose. And so I've recommended this to other parents all over the country, and they've had kids use the little Hunter's porta potties you get at Walmart outside, and a kid only has to do that for a week, and they catch on pretty quickly because most kids prefer to use indoor plumbing. So that's what you do with a child. With a husband, it ain't, pay attention, it isn't worth ruining a marriage over toilet paper. So I have had wives come to me saying, my husband just won't change the toilet paper. And I'm going, yeah, and I mean, good grief, honey. Go into any hotel on the planet, and what do hotels do? Hotels have, now pay attention, this is real rocket science. They put an extra roll right next to the little toilet paper dispenser. Try that. Because if your husband's 40 years old and he hasn't figured it out by now, you're probably not going to train him to do this really complicated task. So I recommend you try the really tricky thing of an extra roll. I wouldn't try training your husband. If it's a roommate who won't do it, I'd carry a roll in with me and let the roommate reap the natural consequences of his behavior and never have paper there at all. So you move on to solutions instead of agonizing and being irritated, because being irritated pretty much never works. Never does. Here's a question from a child who said, this child is 8, as I remember, who wanted to know why staring is rude. This is easy. Looking at someone is a really intimate act. Try this anywhere you go. If it's somebody you care about, and if it's somebody that knows you care about them, if you look at them, they'll feel really touched by you looking at them. They will smile at you. It's very touching. If you want to get in a fight on a New York City subway, I can guarantee you a way. If you're between the ages of 18 and 35 and you're a man, go onto a New York subway and lock eyes with another man, age 18 to 35, and simply look at him for more than, 4 seconds. And you're virtually guaranteed to hear these words. What do you want? Then, if you say nothing and continue to stare at him, he will, almost guaranteed, 90%, stand up. Continue to look at him and he will walk toward you. Continue to look at him and you'll have the fight that you were looking for. And it's because looking at somebody, looking into somebody's eyes, implies that you are evaluating them, that you are judging them, that you are looking into their soul, as it were. And if you care about them, that's a good thing. If there's no contract between you, no understanding, no contract of understanding, no past history of caring, then the judgment is understood to be critical. It's understood that you're saying something bad. So staring is rude because it's understood that you're saying something critical with your look. That's why. Let's see. Oops. Talk about that. Somebody said recently on 2 separate occasions, I heard you say, work first, play later. And I was talking about children, that they do their work first and then play later. But then I also said, don't give rewards for doing work. So I see a contradiction here. And my response is, there's no contradiction because playing is not a reward. Playing is what we live for. Playing is what we have a right to do every minute of our lives. We're here to experience joy. We ought to be playing all the time. But it is necessary that we also work and be responsible in order to survive. And we need to get that done first so that we can enjoy the play. So if you don't do the work, the play is not a reward. The play is withheld. Play is what we have pretty much a right to do. But if you don't work, you die. So in order to teach a child that, the play is withheld. Play is not a reward. It's quite a difference in understanding. Somebody also asked, how do you teach responsibility and impose consequences on an adult who's resistant to learning? Yeah, pretty much don't. At least not in relationships. But you can do that at work. At work, you can impose consequences. And there's an entire book about that called Real Love in the Workplace. Whole sections on how you impose consequences on adults. If an adult in relationships behaves in ways you don't like, you then have choices about whether you want to continue to participate in the relationship. But that's not imposing a consequence. That's simply making a decision about what you want to do. whether you want to even continue to participate with that person. How do you handle it when somebody is annoyed at things you do? For example, one of my roommates hated the way I chewed gum. She complained and complained, so in order to avoid hearing her complaints, I practically stopped chewing, even though I love chewing gum. Well, up to you, but this is one of those victims rule the world. Now, you know, if you're chewing gum into a microphone and it's being magnified by 100-watt speakers or amplifiers into speakers, I suppose that could be considered an imposition on her rights. But there are some victims who just walk around looking to be offended by people. You know, if she doesn't like you chewing gum, then she can walk in the other room because you have a right to chew gum. And victims, I've just known victims who walk around just whining about everything. It's uncivilized to chew gum. I actually had a friend who used to say that to people. And, you know, my response was, you know, it might be, but I'm an uncivilized person. So it would be only proper that I would chew gum, wouldn't it? So you can stay in the room and you can talk to me, an uncivilized person engaged in an uncivilized habit, or you can leave. 1 or 2. Choose what's behind door number 1 or 2. But there you go, because I'm going to keep chewing gum. And I'm not chewing gum, this is going to come to you as a real shock, to annoy you. Because, and here's the bigger surprise, you are not the center of the universe. Everybody doesn't engage in an activity relative to you. They don't. Oh, here's a fun little one, because this involves one of our guests, Rockin' Robin, who's here from, I think, Maui. It's Hawaii, but I can't remember which island, which I realize is critically important if you're from Hawaii. But one of the participants said on the Tuesday night video chat, let's see, there was a new member who was asking what LOL stood for, and somebody replied laughing out loud. And let me see if I can shorten this down a little bit. Anyway, I was talking, and many times as I'm talking, other people are chatting in the little box that you all see. Well, actually, it's a big box. Depends on the size of your screen, where people are making little chats, as many of you are doing right now. As you look down there below, you will see comments from Andy and Jerusa, JRO, Stephanie, Donna, and there's Rockin' Robin, in fact, of whom we are speaking. As we were chatting, this new person sent in a request to Rockin' Robin to please stop typing and listen to what Greg was saying. And JRO saw this request flash across my screen, and it hit me, wow, in the past, I could see myself doing this same thing, that is, making the same request. I must control Rockin' Robin, see that she's interfering with the conversation, seeing that she's interfering with Greg talking. How dare she interview with the video chat? She's just being rude, blah, 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 blah. This is a great case for talking about the law of choice, law of expectations, and so on. So I'm going to kind of distill this, and you can chime in as you like. So the possible contradictions here are between the law of choice and the law of listening. So on the one hand, we've got the law of listening. I'm speaking. We've got the person who's asked the question, and I'm speaking. And yet we've got here people here who are talking. So are the people who are talking potentially interfering with the fact that I'm speaking? Are they interfering with the speaker? Then we've got the law of choice, which says that, you know, people get pretty much to do what they wish. Well, that's kind of an interesting little scenario, isn't it? So let's talk about that. Potentially, the people who are talking here on the screen by virtue of their fingers and giving input could be considered as interrupting the flow of conversation. Could, I suppose, except that, you know, as I'm speaking, the people who are watching and listening don't really have to read this. They don't have to read the text. They can just look at the screen. Why anybody would want to look at me, I can't imagine. But they could look at the screen and simply listen. They don't really have to read the text. Now, if everybody wrote down every thought that they had, I'd never be able to pick up the threads of people who are giving me some feedback, because sometimes I ask people questions who send in questions and they give me some feedback. But so far that's really not been such a big problem. Rockin' Robin offers more feedback than most people. But, you know, she's way chattier than most people. But we're all different. So, it's something that JRO has noticed, is that he's learned not to be a controller and not to say to people like Rockin' Robin, you ought to do something or you ought not to do something, which frankly I think is way more important than telling somebody that they're interfering with the flow of a chat. To me, I haven't found people's comments here on the text box to be an interference at all. It's way more important for us not to get all wrapped up in telling people what to do. Although it's understandable that when people are new to real love, that they would find comments to be a distraction. And it's understandable that when somebody is new, that they would give in to the natural instinct to say, would you please stop a thing? We've been doing that our entire lives. And we've had the example of those that we respect and see as being in positions of authority our entire lives, telling us by way of their behavior that that's the way you're supposed to live, is to tell other people how to behave. Stop it. Stop it. That's what we heard from our parents, teachers, and others from the time we were born. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, haven't we? And so it's only natural that that's what we tell to the people around us. You should or should not do a thing. Like this lady was saying just moments ago. Her roommate told her she should not chew gum. Unbelievable. Yeah, and Andy and Jerusha are making the point that that by comparison to most chat rooms, Rockin' Robin's comments are peaceful. I mean, this chat room is quiet. In some, the flow is explosive. You can hardly follow any line of thought. Brief comment here before we get too close to the end and then I start talking like a machine gun as I sense that the time is running out. Once again, the Real Love Immersion in Atlanta, April 19 and 20. I strongly encourage you to not wait to the last minute to sign up when there will be a rush and we will literally run out of room and say, oh, oops, sorry, there aren't any extra chairs. These Real Love Immersions, for those of you who haven't attended them, are unlike anything many of you have seen. And this next one will be different than anything most of you who are more experienced have seen. I'm going to spend a great deal more time explaining what's going on. Rather than simply working with people and their issues, I'm going to spend a whole lot more time than I've ever done before stopping and saying, here's why I just said what I said. Here are some of the alternatives to what I just said. And here's what many wise men and women say in the situation that I just spoke, and why it doesn't work as well. So we're going to do a whole lot more teaching. And by the way, Rockin' Robin, just love you to death, even with your great big chatty mouth. The, let's see. Here's a question. Several weeks ago, I decided to let our 15-year-old son use my laptop computer to access his emails and other websites about automobiles. Last week, I came home and saw that he was trying to change some settings, and I told him not to change anything on my computers because they were working computers and used for my business. Later, I checked all the accounts and found that he had accessed several internet porn sites through his account, and that someone had used the default guest account to find porn passwords. I immediately changed his password to restrict his accessing his account and discussed the situation with his mother, my wife. His biological mother, my wife, and I agreed that we did not want him accessing or bringing pornography into the home where Jay, our son, only visits on the weekends. The following day, when his mother attempted to explain our decision to restrict access to the computers to times when only we were able to log him on and while we were present, he became angry and denied that he had viewed the porn. Yes, of course. He then began to claim that I had viewed porn sites on his account to further drive him and his siblings away from their mother, my wife. He then ran away, and my wife went chasing after him. This is the typical kind of a combination victim lying, attacking gambit. They have names and numbers, too. We made one attempt to explain why we did not want pornography in our home, starting the conversation by assuring him that we were not angry, but all he could do was deny that he'd viewed it. It's astonishing how many times people can deny that they've done something when they feel backed into a corner. When he ran away again, we realized we were done teaching, that he wasn't interested in learning or even feeling that we loved him. I remember my own addiction to pornography at 13 and how my view of women as existing solely for my pleasure was the result of my emptiness and fear of not being loved. I used countless women over a period of 30-plus years and 2 failed marriages, and my son's family of origin was ripped apart by their father's emptiness and subsequent addiction to pornography. In fact, unknown to all of us until just now, our son's biological father was in the process of evicting his second wife of 3 years in preparation for a pending divorce. That was right at the time that the kid viewed the porn. So the effects of addiction to pornography is still rippling through our children's lives to this day. And then I learned just the other day that when you, the guy writing this, talked to the kid, you also shared that with your stepson, that his behavior would lead to what his father had done. So how could I have handled this situation better? My wife and I agreed that spelling out literally the terms of computer usage and so on might have made a difference in our ability to have our son feel more loved when he made the mistake. So we could have been more specific, but how could we have handled this better? One of the big problems was that you pounded the kid with 3 lessons at one time. Kids don't do well when they have the snot beat out of them with 3 lessons. They can usually only handle like 1, and then you wait for, days, and maybe you can talk about another one. So what you did was you said, you screwed up my computer by not listening to what I told you. So the first lesson was, you were not responsible. Then you said, you brought pornography into our home. You may not have intended entirely to do this, although I think you intended to mostly. That's a great big moral lesson. A great big, you were immoral, and you have tainted our home. So first you were irresponsible, and then you were a great big immoral bad wolf who brought filth into our home. That's 2 great big lessons, 2 separate ones. Then the third one, you are now going to turn out like your father, which is a great big huge guilt trip and another moral lesson. Those 3 are way more than a kid can hear. By now the kid is running down the street, which of course he did. So you can kind of pretty much say one thing. And I would have said something like, I allowed you to use the computer for a certain specific purpose. Your homework, the cars, whatever. But you didn't do that. You used the computer for porn, which is now going to be really inconvenient for me, because I'm going to have to clean up the mess that follows that for weeks. Because everybody who uses computer knows what happens if you go to a porn site. Everybody's heard the stories. All this junk follows it. And you have to clean it up, and you get unwanted garbage. And so that's what the kid needs to know. Just, he was irresponsible. That's it. You can pick one. And you go, look, I know this happened. We're not discussing that. You don't say, did you do it? If you go to a kid who's done a little thing like that, you don't say, did this happen? Because what do you think he's going to say? So you say, I'm not mad about this, but I already know this happened. And so now we've got to talk about how we're going to clean this up. So I'm going to need your help doing it. And so here are some steps that we're going to take. And while I'm here, you can sit over there and do some of the cleaning up. There are programs that clean stuff. But you can help me with some of this. You do one thing. Now, that doesn't mean that this kid wouldn't still lie, wouldn't still blow up, wouldn't still run down the street, wouldn't do all of that. Because the kid's already living in hell. He's already been through 2 divorces in, 3 years. He's in a home where his dad is in the process of breaking up with his second wife. This kid's already stressed out to the max. So it may still have happened. And had you known that this thing with the father was going on, you may not have even brought it up at all. But at least you know that one thing would be plenty. Let's see. I'm going to save the questions that are on the screen for next time, and I'm going to tell you a story. We'll see if we've got time. 2 Saturdays ago, just before, at about 4 in the morning, in a small rural Texas town, about an hour outside of Dallas, 2 young men, 19 and 20, broke into the home of the Caffey family. So this is less than 2 weeks ago. They repeatedly shot the 37-year-old mother until she died. They shot the 13-year-old boy, daughter of this lady, until he died. They stabbed the 8-year-old boy with a sword until he died. They shot the 41-year-old father 5 times until they thought he was dead. And then they set the house on fire to cover up evidence of the crime. The father lived and climbed out a bathroom window to crawl to a neighbor's house while the 2 men got in their car with their girlfriends, who were 16 and 18, to drive off to a trailer where they had sex and fell asleep. Now, why would they do such a thing? I'm kind of always amazed that people ask this question because the answers are almost always obvious. It turns out that one of the girls, the 16-year-old, had been homeschooled all of her life until recently, only the last couple of months. Her father was a strict, Bible-thumping authoritarian who pretty much controlled her all of her life. I read all there was to read on the internet about this kid and about the father and about the murders, and stayed on the internet and watched the video recordings of some of the TV interviews, and the neighbors said that this kid had pretty much no life because the father controlled her, and that the father was referred to as old-timey strict, and that she and the father had had some problems. And then a couple of months ago, for the first time, she was allowed to attend regular school, and she immediately met the 19-year-old boy one of the men who committed the murders and got the biggest dose of imitation love she ever imagined. Immediately fell in love with this kid. And her parents tried to separate them, the 16-year-old and the 19-year-old. Took her cell phone, tried to pry them apart, tried to keep them from meeting, but they kept meeting. And the night before the murders, they absolutely forbid her to see him. For a month before the murders, she and the boy plotted what they could do to stay together. In fact, they decided that the only way they could preserve their little imitation love feast was to kill her parents. So finally, about 10 days ago, they got together, her boyfriend and his friend's girlfriend and her, and at 4 in the morning went to her house and decided that the only way they could preserve this imitation love, which was the most fun she'd ever had in her life, was to go to her parents' house and to have her boyfriend and his friend go into the house and kill everybody in it. I mean, the lessons in this are stunning. She's 16 years old. She's never known, and this is just from all the accounts that I read, I wasn't there, but from everything I'm hearing, has probably never known any kind of real love in her life, and known very little imitation love in 16 years. Goes out into the real world and gets a whopping feast of imitation love for 2 months. And now she'll spend the rest of her life in prison. Imitation love isn't a joke. The feelings of it are real. It feels great. But even though imitation love is, the feelings are real, the happiness it creates isn't. And that's the ultimate deception on the planet. It makes people feel so good they call it happiness. And in this case, these people were willing to give up their lives. They were certainly willing to give up the lives of 4 other people to keep it. And man, the results are just unspeakably tragic. And although these people killed 3 people and were willing to kill the 4th, many of us give up our lives while we're still alive. We give up our lives by devoting ourselves to sex or money or power or whatever. As I read this story, I just could simultaneously hardly believe it, and yet it makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because we see the repetition of this kind of thing all the time. Trying to see if I missed anybody's questions. John said that he asked me many months ago about potty training. And I told him to show his son his underwear, the potty, and let him know that he uses the potty now. And when he wets himself or the bed, I told him to just have him clean it up, wash his clothing and bedding, and put new clothing on. Give direction where needed. But the biggest part is not to be angry. How can you be angry when you're teaching a child that is learning? It takes a lot of time and tons of loving from a parent. But he did it, and it worked. It took about 6 nights. Ooh, John, I tell you, I'm in love with you. But after that, hang on, I hit the wrong button. It's because I'm learning. But after that, my son did not wet his bed or his pants. He would say, Daddy, I need to use the potty. The only times that he's wet his bed has been when he's sick, or I've made the mistake of letting him drink gallons before he goes to bed. Yeah, I've always figured that when that happened, that was my fault. It's an amazing thing when you take on potty training by letting children learn and grow through loving responsibility. Absolutely. That's how we trained each of our kids. We didn't go on and on and on. Oh, and there was one question I didn't get to. Annie wrote me about it, and I didn't copy it into my notes, which is entirely my fault. I have no excuse for it either. We've got 3 minutes. Andy wrote me and asked me, how do you explain sex to children? And I've got 2 minutes, so I don't have time to do it. I'm going to talk about it next time, and I apologize for being dense and not doing it. Let me find it here. How did I not do that? Oh, here it is. So I promised to do it next time, just my mistake. But we trained all of our kids that way. I remember Rachel was, when she was 2, I don't know why I remember her particularly, I think probably because she was a more stubborn child, but she was 2, and I just handed her diapers and said, you'll be changing them from now on. It was on her 2nd birthday, and she looked at me and said, okay, and she actually changed her own diapers for a while, and then she decided that, she asked me for help, how did you do the little things, and because we didn't have paper diapers. She had to learn how to do the pins and the whole business. And there's nothing that cures a child from pooping their pants like having to swish the diapers out in the toilet. She thought that was just absolutely disgusting. So when I said, well, so now you have to take the poopy diaper and you have to swish it out in the toilet like this, and she went, what? And I said, that's what I have to do every time. And she decided from that point on that that was the last that she was ever going to poop in her diaper. So she trained herself from that point on. So it's very effective. So good to have you with us. I apologize to Andy for not getting to her question. No excuse, or Andy for getting to his question. No excuse for that. And we love y'all. We look forward to seeing you a week from tonight. Love ya.